What's up, everyone, and welcome to my podcast called The Traumatized Man. Before I get started, I want to encourage you to please subscribe, like, and share this podcast, as it will help me develop so we can help a lot of people and improve on the quality of the podcast. I'm working on improving on my presentation. So I want to develop this thing into where it helps a lot of young men, but anybody that has struggled with trauma, anybody that has struggled with the trauma of not having a father in your life, or even the trauma of having an abusive father in your life, or an abusive mother. There's so many things that impact a young child when they grow up in these ways. They grow up without what was created to be that way. They were created to be nurtured by a mother and encouraged and taught work ethic by a father. It's supposed to be a team. And to develop a healthy young baby into a healthy adult, you have to follow the process that was created in order to do that. And that's one thing I think we're missing in this country. We're missing the fact that you need both parents in the home. There's always the exception. I would like to think that I'm the exception. But it's not an exception without hurt. The hurt of learning the wrong way, making mistakes. And that's what I'm trying to build here, is to give some words of wisdom, to give some life experiences, different perspectives on life to young men or anybody, young women, to help them change their mindset. Because that's what I've discovered, especially with young men, with the lack of fatherhood, where 1 in 4 children live without a father in this country. It's like 57% black, 30+% Hispanic, 20+% white. We're losing in this area. And, I don't think that this is a good thing. So I think it's something that we need to turn around in our country. And this beautiful thing called the internet allows people like me to get on here and talk about it. Because people that talk a lot start a podcast. So here I am. But I hope to talk about things that add value to people's lives. Not just to talk. Not just to promote myself. I really do want to hope to produce something that helps someone, where they can listen to an encouraging word, they can listen to a different perspective. Because you miss out on things like self-discipline, which is a very common life skill. People don't realize that. It's a life skill. Not everybody can apply self-discipline, obviously. That's why we have professional athletes. Not everybody can do that. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication. The big question is, what is the difference between the haves and the have-nots? People that have a bigger doorway than those that don't. The people that have a little bit less obstacles. Now, don't get me wrong, regardless of what kind of traumatized life or lack of, you could have came up healthy life, you still got to work hard. But what I'm targeting is those mindsets, almost like your mind is bound to a certain set of way of thinking. It's chained up. And you can't think outside of that. You can't think outside of those chains. You can't bring change to yourself, to your lifestyle. You can't understand why. You got to ask yourself these questions. Is why can't I keep a job? Why can't I keep a healthy relationship? Why can't I apply a little bit of self-discipline so I'm not going out partying all the time? A lot of people struggle with things like that. And those are the people I want to help. Some people handle those things just fine. Get up and handle the basic responsibilities of life. But there's a lot of people that don't and struggle with it. And struggle with not pointing the blame on others in other situations. People that make statements like, "You don't know my life." Doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is if you're able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and put in the work to get what you want. That's what matters. I believe that the young men of this country have lost the true definition of what a man is. I don't think we understand it. Even the ones that were raised with fathers. We've lost that definition. and my definition of what a real man is, through learning how to mature and grow up out of all these dysfunctional ways, these things that I developed and latched onto me from having the life that I did. My definition of a real man is a real man has to work. Working allows you to provide and to protect. You protect your family from poverty. You protect your family from lack. Obviously, you provide your family. You provide your family the basic needs. I think that's what a real man is. And that work ethic comes from a father. The second thing is, I think that you need to learn to respect authority. I talked about that story in a previous podcast where the Roman soldier approached Jesus and asked him to heal one of his servants. And Jesus said, let's go to your house. And the servant said, no, sir, you don't need to come to my house. I am a man of authority. And when I tell my servants to go, my soldiers to go, they go. When I tell them to come, they come. You say it and they will be healed. And Jesus said, there's no greater faith than that in all of Jerusalem. And he wasn't even Jewish. To me, the man understood the concept, the universal law of respect and authority. And that's something that a young man without a father doesn't get, because the mother is not the authority. You can't be the nurturer and the authority all at the same time. A nurturer is about love. It's about feeding, coddling, taking care of someone. You cook for them. You clean them. That's what a nurturer is. And it is hardwired in the father to understand, look at life from a logical perspective and understand what a young man needs in order to be successful in this life. And that's work ethic. You got to have drive. You can't be hurt feelings every time someone says something negative to you. You can't be insecure and defensive all the time. You can't be coddled all the time. You can't make excuses for yourself all the time. And that's what this is about. So I want to talk about mindsets, right? How do we get this way? Why can't we see it? Why can't we easily implement these things like hold a job? Why is that so difficult? I personally believe, based on my life, based on what I've assessed in myself, is this thing about not having work ethic, not having the drive not to quit, and not respecting authority. Because sometimes authority needs to discipline you. And I'm not saying moms don't discipline. I think moms do a very good job disciplining. My mom was definitely not afraid of disciplining. What I'm saying is that there's a different approach to it when it comes to a father, even if it sounds mean. Especially if it's a good man, a healthy man that loves his children and would not hurt his children out of anger. There's a certain sternness and respect that's demanded that teaches that young man how to apply this thing called self-discipline. So mindsets, right? One of the things that I always tell young men that I've mentored before in the past is we need to read. And it's somewhat, funny that I tell people that, because I hate reading. I really do. There's nothing better than the ebook. I've read so many books by listening to them audibly. Audible is the best way. And for me. But I think reading is very important. I think researching, I think understanding history is very important. That's why I say my goal is to develop the moral, intellectual, masculine man. You don't need to be a rocket scientist, right? You don't need to be a theologian. You don't need to be a philosopher to understand at a high level why these things are important. Why acquiring knowledge is important. Why having a spiritual walk is important. Understanding it at least. Why having physical self-discipline in your life, from what you eat to whether you exercise on a daily basis, why that's important. It's having the ability to implement those things in your life is what's difficult. A while back, I got into philosophy because I enjoy philosophy. I enjoy history, not because I know a whole lot about it, because I do think there's a value in going and getting a formal education. I could talk more about that in terms of college education, because obviously I do not have one. But I do think there is something to be said about the process on how to learn, and how that process have been perfected throughout the years, and how those that put time and effort, long periods of time and effort to educating themselves, there's a value in that. Definitely, there's a huge value in that. But I think that if you are a person that wants to know truth, if you're a person that just wants to understand things at the high level, where you don't have to break down to the particle level, right? You can understand things from a high level and still understand at least the general understanding of the micro level. You can make good decisions for your life. And what I'm getting at is there's things that exist out there. There's writings and there's teachings. There's philosophies that exist out there that could really help you at least take a pause and evaluate your decision making. Evaluate your view on life. One of the things that I definitely have also learned in my life is that depending on where you live at, not just your race, not just your culture, but depending on where you live at, determines on the mold of the profile that you are building as a person. Being Hispanic, Mexican American, and working the fields, what you do is you visit different places, and they're significantly different. We would go from, this is when I was young in elementary school, of course, very young. We would go to a town called Immokalee, Florida. And Immokalee, Florida is an agricultural town that actually has a lot of drugs and crime. There's a ton of different races of people that live there, from Haitians, from Cubans, from Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, African American. There's just all kinds of people that live there, and most of them are there to work the fields or whatever else. But it's a poverty-stricken town, and we used to go there, and we would stay in these migrant camps. Some of them were like huts or little kind of a string of small apartment, one-room apartments. Some of them were trailer houses, not always up to any code. There's another story behind that, getting shocked at a trailer house. But anyways, we were living in Immokalee, Florida, going to school. We would show up late, so we would register late because we were traveling migrants, traveling according to the season. And I remember one day, myself and all the kids, my brother, my sisters, were outside playing with all the rest of the kids in the migrant camp. We used to call it the campo, el campo. That's what we lived at. The head guy of the migrant camp, he had a house kind of in the center of this camp that we stayed in, and he had a dog. And I don't remember what kind of dog it is, but it was a bigger dog. It was kind of like a mixed pit bull style of dog. One day we were outside playing, and we heard this dog howling. We heard it kind of whining, and then we would hear something splashing, and us kids, we went back there and went to investigate. And in this ditch, there was the dog and the alligator, and they kind of had themselves locked together like this. And there wasn't enough water in there, I don't think, to drown the dog, but the alligator would spin, and then the dog would yank it from back and forth. So we ran back, and I forget who we told. We told the people in the camp, and there was a whole group of Guatemalan migrants that were living in one of the houses, and we told them, and they said, "Where?" And so they went back, and they killed it, released the dog, because the dog was going to get killed, and they ended up chopping the tail off and hanging it from a tree, and basically roasted the tail and gave meat to all the children that were hanging out there. And I share that story because I go from there to move into a town called Columbus Grove, Ohio. I don't know the population, but it's not a lot. I can tell you that it was a village. And we would live outside of these small towns, Columbus Grove, Ohio, outside of Gilboa, Ohio, Pandora, Ohio, Ottawa, Ohio. These were these country farming towns, and the migrants would move there to work the fields, whether it be tomato, potato. But I noticed really quick that the type of, first of all, the environment, right? The animals. You're not going to find alligators. I'm not going to be living in a place where these guys go and kill an alligator, chop the tail off, and roast it in front of the whole migrant camp and feed it to you. It was such an awesome experience that it just never left me. But what it did show me is that your geographical location determines the mold of the profile of your mind, how people acted. The type of the people that were down in Florida where we lived at, all the teachers spoke Spanish. They were bilingual. Not all of them, but many of them. There was all kinds of different Spanishes being spoken down there. And then I moved to Ohio, and nobody speaks Spanish. Only us, right? And the people like us. And we start to realize real quick that there's classifications according to people and where they are and the life that they live, where they fit in society. And what I'm getting at is that I learned through this journey of life that if we were to stay in Florida in that location and live down there, we would think and act and look at life a certain way. And if we were to stay in Ohio where we moved to, we would think and act and look at life a certain way. And what I realized is it's real difficult as I grew up in these towns, mostly in Ohio, but as I grew up, I learned the way the people of that little town held a higher status within that society, how they acted, how they thought. And I learned that my misconceptions of, for example, white people was wrong. Were based off what I heard from the people I hung out with in Florida, family, etc. And I learned vice versa. Theirs is as well. But being a young man growing up in America, I looked at it as a blessing. Like, I get to be like the people in Florida and fit right in. Because I've been there. I lived that. We used to walk really far to this elementary school, and the big warning from our parents was, don't go in the woods because you're going to get kidnapped. And I'm 48 now. That was probably, 5 or 6. But that was what we were looking at. And then we moved to a place where you could walk anywhere you wanted in the town, and you don't ever have to worry about being kidnapped, for the most part. We ran around all day long. And it was just such a culture shock for me that I realized that it depends on where you grow up at. It's not just your race. As a matter of fact, I would say race has less to do with it. I would say race is part of the culture of the environment of where you grow up at. And I realized what I'm truly getting at is we develop these mindsets, right? And it's real hard for us to see outside of these mindsets. It's hard for us to see, usually when I meet someone, when I go work at a place, it's easy for me to put them, because I have this file cabinet of profiles, depending on who you are, what race are you, what part of the country you're from. Are you from a small town or a big town? Were you wealthy growing up or were you poor? All these factors, right? What kind of music do you listen to? A lot of times you can look at a person and understand their profile. But because I had this great opportunity to travel to different places at a young age as a migrant Mexican, I developed pieces of all these different profiles, all these different molds that were developing people. Pockets of people in this country that think a certain way, but really at the end of the day, as Americans, we all think the same way. We're just trapped in our little pocket. So mindsets, right? The mindset of work ethic, the mindset of responsibility, the mindset of there's nothing more important than God, family, The mindset of prioritizing that and then making your actions follow those prioritized list. It's a difficult thing. It really is a matter of self-discipline. If you discipline yourself, you can acquire anything you want. Going back to the conversation about intellect, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Plato. If you haven't heard of Plato, Plato is a Greek philosopher. He was born in Athens, Greece. He was an athlete early in his life, and then he met a gentleman by the name of Socrates, and he was mentored by Socrates. He left Greece because Socrates was actually getting in trouble with the local government at Greece and was executed by the local government of Greece, and they thought that Plato was helping Socrates, devising a plan to help him escape. So he took off, he fled, and he eventually returned. They say that he traveled around the world, Italy, different places, right, Egypt, and eventually he returns at the age of 40, and he started a school called the Academy. What I thought was really unique, by the way, most of this information I got from reading on the internet and watching videos on YouTube. It's that easy. And the more you do research, the more you start understanding the depths of overall philosophy and where these ancient, well-renowned philosophers stand at, where their belief system's at, and how that applies to you. Because it doesn't mean that you should automatically follow all their ways. But what I want to do is get you to think about outside of the box of where you get information from. Things that can help you. So anyways, Plato, he started something called the Academy, and above the doorway he said, "Let no man ignorant of geometry enter here." Obviously very big on academia, right? Very big on education, very big on higher knowledge. I think wisdom was the big driving force there. And wisdom and intelligence is two different things. He wrote something called the Republic, and really, this is what smart people do. Okay, it's Socrates is saying, find thyself as a purpose in this world. That's what people begin to do, right? Especially very intelligent people, and then they realize, what do I do about it? Now that I've found myself, what is my purpose on this life? What do I do about it? Well, maybe we help people with it. So Plato, as many other very intelligent people, began to develop writings on overall the state, government systems. Okay, so he wrote something called the Republic, which was the ideal state. What is a government system that allows the people that it's governing to thrive, to be happy, to maybe to live in a utopia. And within that, I want to get into something that he wrote that's within that writing, the Republic. It's called the Allegory of the Cave. It's so interesting, and it's so applicable to overall mindsets and to how we think. And I just want to be kind of thought-provoking with you, right? He wrote something within that called the Allegory of the Cave. And I want to go over it a little bit with you because it's a very interesting writing, and it very much applies. So the Allegory of the Cave is really this story about these prisoners that have been imprisoned since birth. So these prisoners chained to a wall in a dark cave and only can see the forward wall in front of them. They're chained their back to a wall. Behind them, there may be another level or another wall, and there's a fire. In front of that fire, people come and they flash images, creating shadows on the wall that the prisoners see. And as time goes on, the prisoners begin to name the shadows. One looks like a sun, one looks like a bird, and they start naming these shadows, and they start realizing that these things come out on certain times of the day. So pretty soon, as you would assume, as their life goes on, living in the cave chained to a wall, probably being fed scraps, is normal to them. They learn to be accustomed to that life. They learn to enjoy the small amount of enjoyment that they may have. Maybe it's just seeing those shadows at a certain time of the day that makes them feel better. But they develop this mindset living in this cave. They don't know anything else since birth. And one day they wake up and one of the prisoners' chains are removed. So that prisoner begins to kind of venture around, and he ends up wandering out of the cave. As he exits the cave, obviously he begins to get just blinded by the sunlight, by all the noises, the birds, maybe water flowing, animals, different animal noises. And as his eyes adjust, he begins to realize the beauty that's up there. He begins to realize everything that they've been missing. So he goes back to the cave, and he starts to tell the people in the cave, like, this is what we're missing. You guys don't get it. And the people in the cave reject him. I think that story applies to everyone. I think you have a choice not to follow the sheep. You have a choice on whether to venture outside of that circle, of that bubble. And I'm not saying the bubble's bad. Maybe it's comfort. Maybe that's where people want to be. But what I'm saying, it's worth an effort as a person to look at your life and challenge the way you look at yourself. Challenge your ideology. Challenge how you treat people. Challenge how insecure you are. Challenge yourself on whether you can keep a job or whether you're lazy or not. At the end of the day, I believe that we are a three-part being. I believe we are a spirit, which is the conscious. I believe that we are a body, which is the vessel that allows us to live in this dimension. And I believe we are a mind, soul being, which is the emotions and the thoughts. And I believe it's very important to bring balance to those three beings. That's who we are. It's so complex. This thing is more complex than what we think. And the struggle for us is to know whether we listen to our flesh, our bodies, the vessel that we live in, to know whether we listen to our spirit, or to know that we listen to our emotions or the random thoughts that pop in our mind. That's the challenge. And that's where self-discipline has to come in. That's where wisdom comes in. The one thing that I can tell you that I can probably differ a little bit when it comes to Plato and his overall philosophy, his writings, The Republic, it really is set up to allow, it's kind of a merit-based system to allow the intellectual to arise to the top and govern the people. And on paper, I think it makes sense. But I think what happens is that the educated become the elite. So they become high-minded. It becomes elitism. And this is why I always say I'm here to help the moral, then the intellectual, masculine man. I think you need morality to guide your intelligence. Because if not, you're just all proud about your intelligence and yourself, and you start worshiping yourself. Getting back to the understanding of who you are. It's important for you to challenge yourself. There's a part of us that can be very programmed. For example, if you grow up in an area where you're a minority, and it's an area that's not accepting towards minorities or holds minorities at a certain classification, you will grow up with that mindset of, I can't achieve any more than this because I'm Mexican or because I'm black. It affects you. It creates mindsets. We never did that. Our family never did that. It's almost like you're a sellout. You can't leave the cave. You can't think different. But I would argue that you need to think different. You need to challenge the status quo if you really want to find yourself. If you really want to grow out of these issues that have developed from your traumatized past. You need to develop self-discipline in your life. And the only way you do it is just do it. Control your emotions. Control your insecurities. And it's very difficult. I fail at it even today. That we need to challenge the status quo, starting with ourselves. Why do we like the things that we do? Why do we like the foods that we do? Why do we like the music that we do? Why do we dress the way we do? We need to change the mindset. You can only go as far as your mindset. And if you have this image of yourself, of who you think you are, there's a high probability that you're going to miss out. You're going to miss out on developing yourself, growing into what God created you to be Don't waste time. I have seen men go through all of their lives with no jobs, alcoholics, drug addicts, and die in that manner. Living at people's houses, living at friends or family's houses. Living to drink. That's all they live for. Where's my next buzz going to come from? I never understood it. Why would you keep doing that? We know the results. I don't judge people by mistakes. I judge them by what they do after their mistakes. You have a choice on whether you continue to live like you are or whether you decide to venture out of the cave. It's your choice. And I encourage you to think different. I encourage you to work on trying to be an intellectual. Again, you don't have to go through years of college to be an intellectual. We are living in the best time on earth. You have all the information you need right on the internet, right on YouTube. You should learn some physics. You should understand the purpose behind it. Defining God's creation all the way down to the particle. Defining energy and light. You should learn the high levels of that. You don't have to get the Nobel Prize. We're not going to go out and get jobs doing that, but we should understand the concept behind it. It's going to make you a better person. It's going to help you make better decisions. I encourage you to challenge your status quo, challenge your mindset, and push yourself to do something different in your life. Because whatever you're doing now is brought you to where you're at now. And if you keep doing the same thing that you've done up until this point, you will stay at the point where you're at now. You cannot change without implementing something different. The definition of insanity. Expecting different results by doing the same thing over and over again. The only way you get different results is if you change your actions, your decisions. So I encourage you, evaluate yourself. Think about coming out of the cave. Even that little simple story, you don't need to understand the whole depth of Plato. Because that's what we become. We become our environment if we allow ourselves to. Challenge your mindset and do something different. You'll see differences in your life. Okay. So, like I said before, I want to go over these 21 principles of Dokido. And I'm on number 2. So, number 2. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. The pursuit of pleasure distracts from the path of discipline. True fulfillment comes from mastering thyself, not indulging in temporary desires. Seek instead the joy found in the process of becoming stronger. A warrior's path is one of balance and not excess. Self-discipline. And although we're not striving to be samurai warriors, we could take these words, we can take these understandings, we can take this wisdom, and we can apply it to our lives. And you can make a big difference. So that when you have children, you can implement these principles in their lives. It's self-discipline. Don't seek pleasure for its own sake. If you're just out seeking pleasure, you're a dog. You're an animal. Literally. Humping everything. Animals hump their own relatives. It's disgusting. Be a real man. Apply some discipline. Don't just seek pleasure. You can enjoy that pleasure in the right applications, in the right environment. Nothing wrong with a man enjoying pleasure, but the right application in the right environment. If you're just seeking pleasure, you have no self-discipline. You'll never gain self-discipline. If all you seek is to pleasure yourself, to go smoke, to go drink, to go have sex, to play video games, everything's pleasuring yourself, not to go to work. Self-discipline, guys. I encourage you to please subscribe, like, share, get the word out. I want to help people. I think I have some stuff to share. I think a lot of people do. I want to invite some people. I'm going to move out of this room. I'm investing in some equipment so you can hear me better. You can see me better. I'm investing in my presentation. I'm practicing. I'm going to bring some different guests on here so that you guys can hear different perspectives on manhood. People from my generation, people from the generation above me, the baby boomer generation, business people, maybe fitness people. So thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.